Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Magicians. Another great episode. A lot of things went down, so let's kind of break everything down bit by bit. First of all, we have essentially our main squad being Julia, Quentin, Josh, and Katie, who's now kind of being brought into the fold. Because for her, it's like, well, helping bring back magic will mean, in fact, helping Penny is kind of her main reason. But obviously, there's still bad blood between her and Julia, which is sad. Like, ultimately, you understand where she's coming from because it's like, well, after everything that was sacrificed, John killing himself for the purpose of stopping Reynard and you let him go. I mean, granted, it was still used for the ultimate good because you stopped, I keep doing it again. Umber, right? Because Umber is the one that was the dick that was trying to throw everything into chaos and destroy Fillory. It's like he stopped him and everything. I mean, you kind of somewhat protected magic, but at the same time plunged it. It's like, I don't know if you would have been able to find a different way to help with that. Because I doubt even if you went to their parents, you would have ever fixed that situation. But nevertheless, that was last season. Yes, that still affects this season, but nevertheless. It's all about tracking down Mayakovsky because they need his batteries to help charge up Julia so that they could use the clock to get to Fillory to help Elliot with the whole quest for the 7 keys and everything. I do like that it tells a story in particular because the story stems from like a knight who had a daughter, and that said knight who's going to pass on his teachings, but he had a daughter instead of a son. That whole stupid thing of like, oh yeah, girls can't... blah, 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 right? But he ends up being captured by an evil witch, and said evil witch wants the 7, like, I guess not necessarily she wants the 7 keys, but the 7 keys can be used to unlock her father's cell, which is in a castle at the end of the world, which is kind of interesting. I always like stuff like that. The end of the world, like, oh, at the edge of the end of the world or something like that. Like there being a finite place for it is just kind of always an interesting thing. It is in a different realm and everything too, so it's not like it's necessarily going to be on Earth, which is going to be interesting, because maybe that would mean we'll get an opportunity to go to other worlds besides, just Earth and Fillory, but maybe it's somewhere at the edge of Fillory is where it is specifically, so maybe we'll just kind of have to wait and see. I'm curious to see how that all ultimately ties into the story, because the fact of the matter is, it's the narrative leading them to try and track down the keys, so obviously it plays that point there, but then maybe, in what shape or form, like, is it going to be like, the knight's daughter in particular, is she gonna be someone that we end up meeting or know in the show? So stuff like that, Because another question I have, like I brought up before, is like, what about Julia's situation? That's something I brought up in the last week's episode as well. It was like, well, maybe this would be an opportunity to find out more about Julia's family, whether it's like her family that we've only momentarily met. Like, we've heard talks of her mom. Like I said, we met her sister. Maybe that's not her biological family. Maybe it has something to do with the story. Maybe she's a descendant of the said person. So, I don't know. You have to wait and see about that. Maybe there's no connection there at all. Like I said, it's too early in season for us to really be able to say anything for sure. But I like the fact is that this all ties into Mayakovsky. Him and Emily apparently are married, which kind of threw me off for a loop. Well, multiple things. For one, it's like, well, the bond has been broken so he can leave. I was like, right. Like, he never expressly said, like, he was talked about the fact is he was cast out, but I didn't realize it was like a bond as word is what kept him there. I mean, they just said bond, but I assume that's the only like bond we really know in this series. It's like bond as word, like what Julia used with Martin last season, as well as like Quentin tried to do the same thing with Nif and Alice, but still, it seems like that's what bound him to, was it Antarctica, is where he was kind of shipped off to. But now that magic is gone, that bind is gone. I thought the reason why he left was just because he's just him, and it's like he got those magic balls. I mean, those spirits to be able to have magic in and everything like that. But it's like, oh, what's one of the first stops he makes is to get back with Emily, because he did legitimately still have feelings for her and everything. So that kind of took me by surprise. Because the way things made it seem like, I mean, it didn't seem like he really cared about anyone. And I guess in retrospect, it's like, well, he did kind of talk about kind of like doing so. I mean, he had sex with a lot of his students. Like he talked about that last season, but I don't remember him especially being like, oh my God, like I'm still in love with Emily. That was just kind of an interesting thing that took me off by surprise. Like I said, he did never mention her really, but maybe it's because Quentin kind of brought it up last season that it kind of really stuck with him because like, he's seen what Quentin was willing to do for Alice. So it's like, oh, you owe this to Alice and everything because everything that kind of played out was your fault. Maybe it made Mayakovsky look at things in a bit different light. I don't know. Which still doesn't, I mean, skipping around and everything, still never really found out why she turned Mayakovsky into a bear. Because we thought it was the other woman in this situation. Said woman ended up being one of the professors from Breaksville's, Lipson. I thought that was kind of interesting. It turns out the whole spears containing magic and stuff like and warning about magic disappearing, that wasn't Mayakovsky, that was actually her, because Mayakovsky is kind of a drunk asshole. Let's basically that. And so she's the one that was working with him. I guess like he had the resources she needed, at least some of the key components, or like maybe he's the only person she could really listen to, because I guess no one else was going to really listen to her, so she had to turn to him. The way it made it seem like it was kind of like a torn affair type of thing of like, oh, there was something there. And she got super pissed because it's like he shows up with Emily when they go to talk and everything, and it's like, wait, she's your wife and everything. Oh, you're married now and everything. So it kind of probably pissed her off. And I'm guessing the reason why Emily got pissed off because she found out about something between Mayakovsky and Lipson. So it's like, oh, I'm not special. Like I said, she never really went into why she did it. Maybe she did and I missed it, but I don't recall. She was just kind of like, nope, I turned him into a bear. But it's your husband. It's like, well, he's your husband. It's like, well, yeah, that's why I didn't kill him. So I assume that has to be it. I mean, for Lipson, it's just kind of like, I'm sure it's that insult to injury is like, oh, you're with someone else. And at the same time, after everything I've sacrificed, you're maybe also like the fact is he was going to run off with the batteries. I kept forgetting what the word was for those. I kept calling them like, oh, spears, because I was legitimately forgetting. It's like, right, they're batteries, magic batteries. So maybe like he was going to run off with Emily and take those with him. And it's like, those are literally the only sources of magic left in this world. And well, not just in this world, but the world in general, with the exception of supernatural creatures. And you want to take it, you jerk. Maybe that's what kind of set her off. I even thought it was kind of messed up too. Like when Quentin was trying to track her, they're like, "Oh, where's she's going? Oh, she's going to try and find the top, the highest building she can jump off of." And Quentin was like, "Oh yeah, I know exactly where." And Julia's like, "How do you know that?" Essentially, it's like, well, basically back then when it was my, thoughts to be like, oh, it's a place that he thought about exploring. Because remember, Quentin was kind of suicidal back in season 1. That's why he was kind of like kept under like watchful eyes and stuff like that, because he was just in a mental facilities. Prior to the series starting and stuff like that. So that was kind of like, I was like, oh, it's helpful, but quite sad that you knew exactly where to go. Like immediately it came, I was like, oh man, that's super sad. Luckily they were able to stop her before she ended up jumping. I mean, to be fair, it's just her situation is it's an amplification of just what everyone in the magic world is feeling, because it's like, even Quentin, and I think Quentin nailed it pretty hard, very elegantly in this episode, being like, we were all spoiled because we all were so pissed about the things magic couldn't do for us. It couldn't do this, it couldn't that. We were just so pissy and complaining about it. And now that we never really thought about what a life would be without magic, how dull and just how terrible a life without magic would be, so. But I love that the fact is, like, her way of helping, Lipson trying to do something good with the magic, she brought a dinosaur-like creature, because it's like almost like half human at the same time. Sadly we never got to see what it actually looked like. We only saw drawings of it for the kids, and obviously like these people without love, and it's like this huge orgy in a park. And I love the fact that they kept drawing Julia and Quentin and just kept pulling on. He's like, no, I'm good. And then you see at one point Julia's just kind of there. She's like, oh, like, and it would seem like even Julia was like, I don't know what was happening. I was like, oh, like, I guess it was because the spell was still kind of a little active and it was slowly drawing her in. It begs the question why. It seems like it was working a bit on her, and why not it wasn't working on Quentin. Maybe it's because the whole Alice is still in his heart thing. So maybe because for Julia, she hasn't been in love for a long time. So there's no like love there in her heart, because she hasn't been in a relationship since season 1. What was her boyfriend's name? Who was basically forced to forget her by those other hedge witches that worked underneath Marina. Nevertheless, maybe that was kind of supposed to be representing, but nevertheless. I also love the fact is that Alice had to get a cat, because it turns out that's how you detect the lamprey. It's just, she's like, really? That's what she was responding to last episode with that whole situation. And of course, because of the whole battery situation, she ends up, crossing paths with Quentin, which she's not really liking. She did bring up something interesting. He was like, well, how did you find it? Was like, well, no surprise. Like, it took a bunch of us working together to find it, but obviously you would be able to find this information about the battery and stuff and come here by yourself because you're Alice Quinn. It's just like, whatever that means. So even now she still struggles with that identity. Like, it's something I brought up at the end of the last episode, how she's eating the bacon. And so like her and Quentin thing at the end of season 2, like the whole, like them eating that plate of bacon, that's kind of what kind of like started her kind of coming back, and her and Quentin sitting there eating it together was kind of like the catalyst for everything else, kind of like possibly them going back. But she's still claiming like, no. Like, I wanted to, like I said last episode, it kind of showed that she was kind of like, no, I'm just used you because I wanted to try and feel like we could be us again. But no, it seems like she's kind of struggling between that Niffin side of her, as well as I'm sure that Shade side of her is like, no, you still care. You're just having a hard time readjusting. You haven't 100% adjusted yet. So she kind of stuck, it's like those two sides of her pulling at her, because let's not forget, because her Shade last season was like, please, like her Shade was thankful that this was being done. So, but having given up everything she had, being a Niffin and everything, all just being pure magic and everything. I mean, to be fair, Quentin kind of did you a favor, I guess, arguably you could say, because it's like if he had not killed Umber, you wouldn't be in a situation you are as back to being human, because you'd probably be a lot. I mean, especially the way Friar Joseph kind of puts it, it seems like it was even worse. Because you pull from the wellspring and Niffins are pure magic, you would eventually die out anyway. We haven't seen him so far, so either he's already dead or off kind of doing his own thing before he dies. So Alice would be kind of in the same situation. So not the most favorable situation anyway, but still, nevertheless. Katie is the one who ended up getting the ball of magic, because for her it's about helping Penny, which, it's kind of always been her main focus. She could kind of like, because for Katie, like, that's the only thing she really cares about right now is Penny. Like, she doesn't care about the other group. She doesn't care about Julia. Even they're not best bitches anymore, or just because of everything that went down last season. So for her, it's like, you guys don't really care about Penny. I'm the only one that really cares about him. So she's going to do whatever she can. I am curious to see what happens the moment Harriet finds out. She's probably going to go to Harriet about this whole situation, because Harriet might be because Harriet's the one that's tracking down a way to heal him and everything. So now she has some magic and Penny's there. So she just needs Harriet. But who's to say Harriet won't just take some of that magic and use it for herself? Because, Julia's like, okay, what we can do is we can use some of the magic to heal Penny and the other bit of the magic to help us get the Fillory so we can track down the keys and everything. So whether it'll work out like that, I don't know. Like I said, Harriet kind of seems like she's kind of very schemish. I don't know. Especially after all this, kind of like, like she brought it up to Katie last episode, like, the stuff I had to sacrifice to kind of help you out, kind of time for you to kind of help me out. Like I said, because we still are not 100% sure what she's up to. And now that I'm thinking about it, retrospect, I brought it up earlier, the whole aspect about, the daughter helping her father. What if that's her? What if that's what her whole situation is, what she's trying to do in the poison room? Maybe she was trying to find this specific book that Quentin and them have about trying to track down the keys and everything. Or maybe the poison room is connected to said way to I don't know, maybe Harriet has nothing to do with that, but I don't know, because she's the only character, like, she's an already established female character that we know nothing about. We only got a little bit about her, and she only popped up in like 2 episodes last season, like one big chunk of one episode and then a tiny bit at the end of the season. That was about it. So she's still kind of an enigma, but I'm wondering, could she be the daughter from the story? That'd be kind of interesting. Like I said, it might just be someone that we haven't met yet, but I'm still already throwing in the ties to be like, maybe it's someone we already know. But nevertheless, I'm curious to see how that whole situation plays out. And on the Fillory side of things, we have, at first I was wondering about that, because Elliot's telling everyone, it's like, what are we going to do? We're going to go to the place that they refer to as After Island. It's like, we're going to go there to collect taxes. I'm like, why are you lying saying you're going to collect taxes? It's all about the key. And then the queen was talking to him and everything. I was like, right, because they're watching you and you have to lie about what you're really up to. I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm also curious too why like the queen decided that she was going to let Elliot take Finn with him. It's like because he's like, Finn's kind of in her crazy mode right now, so I was like, why would I take her? But it seems like it's the queen's idea, and they also have Frey, the fragile. I forgot what they call her, the fragile woman or something like that. It turns out that is Elliot and Finn's child. Basically, she's a teenager now just because time works differently. I kind of figured as much. It had to be something like that. I mean, in the regard, like, there's still room for that possibility, but it was like my thought. I brought it up last episode. Like I said, I might have brought it up last season. I don't remember. It's a whole situation of like, well, they needed a human on the throne. Like the king of Fillory has to be a human. I mean, the fact of the matter is, we never really discussed, like, can there be a queen of Fillory? Like, obviously, Margot's a high queen, but, like, it was something that kind of got brought up last season, too. Like, the other high king, like, the other queens and king, that being Quentin, doesn't have any real say. Ultimately, it's more like you can put your opinion out there, but only, like, the High King's rule is what matters the most. What he says goes. You can add your input, some stuff here and there, but ultimately it all comes down to Elliot. So I'm wondering, but I don't know if they've ever really said like outright like there being a High King, but maybe that's what the whole situation is going to be about. I mean, the fact is, matter is like I don't think even last season we never found out like the gender of his child. So it's kind of like that's why I guess I just assumed it was going to be a boy because of the whole like throne situation. I thought that's what the fairies were aiming for. Maybe that's still a possibility because I feel like even though she's not a boy, like she could still take the throne because she is Elliot's blood. But nevertheless. But I think that's kind of an interesting situation because it's like, well, she has loyalty to the queen and everything, but it's like, that's still your daughter, which Finn's kind of all in belief about it. I'm like, oh my God, this is my little girl. Like, oh, we get to spend so much time together. It's like, oh, we're a family, which obviously Elliot has his hesitations, but maybe that's just because, Elliot was never all that like, whoa, I'm going to be a dad, like, because it's a lot of responsibility. But now it takes on a whole new world of its own because like your potential child is back and not just as a child, but as a full on teenager. And it's just like, and he's literally a teenager himself. Let's not forget that because he's still like, I mean, he's a teenager pushing young adult. Like, I don't know. Have they ever expressed how old they are? I guess in all retrospects, they've got to be in their early to mid 20s. College age, but I haven't even think about that till just now. But nevertheless, that's a lot to deal with, but Finn's kind of been a little crazy carrying around logs of wood and just being like, oh my God, my baby, and just kind of acting a little off a rocker a little bit. It makes you go, not really like she's the most sane person to really put that into, be like, oh yeah, that's our daughter. So not really the best person to believe. I also appreciate too that the boat they're using actually has a personality. It hasn't come up in the story too much, aside from it like knocking Pike off the boat because he called the boat an asshole. But other than that, it hasn't really played up anything. But the way Tick was talking about it, like, oh, this could be a problem. But even though it's like, oh, I didn't see a problem yet. Is a question yet. So I'm kind of wondering, like, what's going to be the next step in that? Like, that's got to play some story relevance. It hasn't really played a part this episode, but I feel like that's going to come up soon in some shape or form. I just thought that's kind of interesting. Because it also kind of reminds me of Doctor Who, because the TARDIS kind of works the same way, because the TARDIS kind of has a personality of her own. So I thought that's kind of pretty neat. But I also appreciate in this episode they go to the After Islands. I thought things were going to be a little more dire for Elliot because it's like, oh, your reign doesn't really mean as much going outside. But I guess maybe this particular island, I thought they were referencing this island when they were talking about, well, he goes out, his reign doesn't reach as far. But maybe they were talking about other places, not just this place in particular, but other places. This took them to the After Islands first because that's where one of the first keys, well, the first key was. I thought that whole situation was kind of interesting with the whole Father Poe situation, creating that creature known as a shadow bat. Makes you wonder, will we actually see one of those for real as the series progresses? It was all for the purposes of kind of making his flock follow him. It was more like a cult situation, like him keeping all the control and power and leading essentially by fear and stuff like that. Even killing their own people just to prove a point, just to have power. I mean, makes you wonder, was like he just some regular Joe Schmo before he got the key and then it's like, oh, I can use this. Well, because Elliot's like, it's illusionary magic, which is kind of interesting considering the fact that there's no magic to draw upon, but I guess the keys themselves generate magic that you can tap into if you hold on to it. I guess they kind of work like mystical creatures because their magic comes from themselves. They don't draw upon the power of the wellspring like like vampires or God, well, I would assume gods, not assume, we definitely know the gods because we met one last episode, as well as dragons. They're all like immune to the whole situation. So I guess like these keys work in the same way, I guess because they are special keys. Like we still don't know like even where they came from and what their real purpose is, other than like, oh, it opens to that cell. I mean, not cell, but that knight's prison. But at the same time, it's like, well, what does that have to do with restoring magic, you know? Maybe I'm forgetting what, was it the big? No, it's the Great Cock said to Elliot last episode about this whole like quest restoring magic. He didn't actually go into specifics about how it would restore magic, just that it would. I also thought it was kind of interesting too that basically the chapters of the book unlock because at first it's like, oh, there's blank pages. I'm like, well, that sucks. It's like we get this story and then we're not going to finish it. Okay, which is also kind of interesting because if you remember, each season kind of treats like these stories like books, especially because it's like a lot of it's kind of written from like Quentin's perspective, and I just thought that was kind of interesting, and we're continuing that, but it's like it's an outside book because basically the first season and second season are essentially kind of like books that Quentin wrote. This third season is kind of a book kind of by someone. It seems like it's from a third person perspective, but maybe it's just from a first person perspective, just being told from a third person perspective. I know that's confusing. That the person who wrote the book is hiding the fact is that they are in fact the daughter from that book. I think, who, like I said at the time, I'm thinking Harriet, but that's just where my mind is right now. I could be completely wrong about that. We'll just kind of dive into that later on. But I think it's kind of interesting that it unlocks like that. Like I said, I wasn't thinking. I thought it was just kind of like, oh, it's just going to be like, oh, you're just not going to know, like the book was never finished. I was like, no, it is finished. You just have to collect each key piece by piece until to be able to get to the next, collect the key to get to the next chapter to find out the next key's location and whatnot. We did see that Quentin was possessed by what I can only assume is the Lamprey. We haven't really gone into detail. We don't know exactly what the Lamprey is, just that it can possess people. It doesn't seem like that's, so the Lamprey isn't a Niffin, because Niffins can't do that, at least I don't think they can. I mean, the whole reason why Alice's situation happened like that was just because of the, Keiko Demon. That was the only reason why that situation happened with her and Quentin. So, I mean, maybe if a Niffin feels the need to, it can possess a human. So, I don't know what his situation is, but it seems like more like the Lamprey is more like a parasite, but nevertheless. It seems he's in Quentin now, so that's an interesting twist I wasn't expecting. I also like what happened in the hospital because like Alice was there with her cat and everything, and all of a sudden it explodes. I was like, oh, that's a terrible warning sign. I mean, it gets to the point across, but I was like, that sucks. That poor cat. I'm also curious too because like Alice made that whole promise, like, oh yeah, it was like, oh, are you a religious girl? Like, oh, you got to promise to God that you will take care of this cat or something like that. I feel like there might be more to that. Might not be, but it just they went out of their way to kind of bring that up. Makes me go, there's more to that. Like, there's going to be a price to pay for her not taking care of that cat for whatever reason. Kind of like Penny in the whole, because he was a douchebag to that guy, like he ended up losing control of his arms because the guy cast kind of a curse on his hands. Haven't seen that guy subsequently since season 2. Don't know if that's going to come back around in some shape or form. But nevertheless, I even like Quentin being like, yeah, her cat was sick, that's why it exploded, like they do. It's like, God, Quentin. But nevertheless, overall, a great episode. I'm very interested to see what goes on with the next episode with the days continuing as they are. So, really loving the season so far. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good